Welcome back to another live stream. Today I'm live streaming on my phone. We reacting to watching the detective on Raw homicide mystery food episode A&E. So let's get into it.
At that point, he picks up his rifle and he starts shooting out the window at the cops that are out there. He didn't hit anybody, luckily, and the police officers who were surrounded the house, they situation is, he said, I don't want you to send a robot. Well, what does this robot look like? So I tried to make light of it after this time, talking to this guy for 12, 15 hours. I said, well, did you ever see the movie The Terminator? He goes, The Terminator? I said, yeah, the robot's a little bit like that. So why don't you drop your gun, come on out, and everything be okay. He starts asking me, please don't send in the Terminator. I don't want the Terminator. Please don't send the Terminator. I said, listen, I don't have a choice in this. If you're not going to surrender, if you're not going to drop your weapon, you're not going to come out, we're going to send in the Terminator. Maybe it would scare him. Then maybe he would surrender, drop his weapon, and come out. At that time, the emergency service cops decided, so listen, this has been going on long enough. We're going to send the robot in. At that point, he sees the robot. He basically killed our robot. We lost contact with him for a couple of hours.
Come on, buddy. Time to come out. No people got hurt here today.
We tried negotiating through a bullhorn. They had spotlights on the house. Still, he wouldn't talk to us. Finally, early the next morning, he says to me, I can't do this anymore. I said, listen, this is great. Put the gun down. Nobody else is going to get hurt. We'll take care of you. I promise you, nobody will hurt you. He puts the phone down. At that time, we hear another shot fired. I try to talk to him. I'm calling his name. The emergency service cops outside, they get on a bullhorn. We don't hear anything. As they scanned the area there, they had found the male. He had shot himself in the head. After this ordeal, I went home exhausted. Being up for over 24 hours, I just went home and went to bed. Waking up the next day thinking this is all behind me now. Little did I know, 2 weeks later, the shooter's mother was found in the basement of their home, stuffed into a well. This brought the body count to 5 people.
I was a member of New York City Police Department for 21 years, 10 as a police officer and 11 as a detective. Started out in uniform and worked my way into various plainclothes units, narcotics, the Narcotics Bureau being one of them. Eventually found myself transferred to a detective squad in Queens, New York, and Southeast Queens. The work was varied, which I liked. You know, it was always something new, always something different. It wasn't the same old thing. After 11 years in the Detective Bureau as detective, I found that people will never surprise you. You can't be surprised about anything that happens from one day, and you know, just you're expecting a regular day, and something will pop out of the ordinary, and it might change your life. The skeletal remains of a young female, approximately 14 to 18 years old, was found in an overgrown, vacant lot. What was left of the torso and the skeleton appeared to be burnt by some type of accelerant. We were unable to identify this individual. There was no jewelry, no identification, nothing found in the area. The outcome looked kind of bleak. Skeletal remains of a young female, approximately 14 to 18 years old, was found in an overgrown, vacant lot. What was left of the torso and the skeleton appeared to be burnt by some type of accelerant. We were unable to identify this individual. There was no jewelry, no identification, nothing found in the area. We weren't able to match him up to any reports of missing persons at that time. The outcome looked kind of bleak. The skull was brought to an artist. A rough drawing was made of what the artist thought that this person looked like based on the skull structure. Those posters were circulated, and after 2.5 years, the remains of this young girl was still unidentified. The skull had been kept separate from the other remains. The other remains were buried on Potter's Field Cemetery off of Rikers Island, and attended to by inmates of that facility. And it's for the unidentified and people without any other means for burial. I was working in a precinct burglary team, and the regular procedure was to bring everybody that's been arrested in the precinct to be interviewed by the Detective Bureau to see if they can get a little further information about any of the crimes. And at one point, the anti-crime team had made 2 arrests for burglary in the precinct, and they brought these individuals up, and since I was a member of the burglary unit, I interrogated them. One individual, the suspect in that burglary, was kind of highly agitated. There was just something that set me off about him. I told him that I thought that he was responsible for a lot of the burglaries that had happened in the precinct, and I pretty much impressed upon him how it would be in his best interest to cooperate with me. After a bit of time, he eventually confessed to doing 5 other burglaries in the precinct. Another detective and myself took him for a canvass of the neighborhood so he could point out the addresses that he had burglarized. He could tell where the buildings were. Some of them were commercial, some of them were residential. As my partner and I had him in the car, I continued to interview him about other crimes. As fate would have it, there was a homicide the previous night that was domestic in nature, and the female's body was also set on fire after she was killed. And touching on that, I asked him if he knew anything about that female that was killed and burnt. Amazingly, we were just driving past the vacant lot where this body had been found 2.5 years before. He became highly agitated and said, "Yeah, you mean that girl in the lot over here? Yeah, I knew who she was." And at that point in time, the hair on the back of my neck stood on end. And at this time, 2.5 years, she had gone unidentified. He told me what her name was, and I asked him if he knew where she lived, and we drove over to the house, and he pointed out the house. We eventually made it back to the precinct, and I ran the address and found that there was a female, 13 years old, that was a chronic runaway that had numerous missing persons reports filed on her, but she had returned over and over again and been returned to the parents. During our interview of this individual, and his knowledge of the circumstances of the crime and his knowledge of who she was made me highly suspicious. As the interrogation went on, he progressively gave more information, from knowing about it to being there beforehand to hearing about it. We stepped our interrogation of him. There were members of the homicide team that were brought in. Different detectives took turns questioning him and talking to him. After a few hours, he finally broke, and after you talk somebody into a corner and you catch them in enough lies, ultimately at the end, the only thing to give up to is the truth. And he had told us that he knew the girl from the neighborhood. He met her. They had plans of going to get high. He was going to get high with her in the lot, and his intentions were of a more amorous nature, and he tried to push himself upon her. She resisted. He told us that he got frustrated at the time, picked up a rock, and bashed her head in. He later returned to the scene with some chemicals from the household and set fire to the location in an attempt to cover up the body. To identify the remains, we were able to locate dental x-rays. Dental records are always a good way to identify remote, and met another detective at a dentist's office that does forensic work for the city. It was kind of strange going into a dental office with people waiting in the waiting room with a skull in a box and being seated in an exam room while the dentist took x-rays of the skull. The matchup was a positive. We identified the young lady, something I thought we would never do. I had to go and inform the parents that we did identify their daughter, that she had been dead for quite some time. It was a little strange. The skull was still in the box in the trunk of the car. When it was all wrapped up and he was brought to court, it was a great relief. Here's a case that I thought would go unsolved, and somebody who would be unidentified, and parents that had no clue as to what happened to their daughter at such a young age. The killer was eventually convicted at trial. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison, and he's currently serving his term. I know every detective that worked on that case got a little bit of pride about how it turned out.
I grew up in the neighborhood. I'm a Brooklyn guy, as you could probably tell by my speech. I tell everybody through two speech courses, I still sound like this. I tell everybody, they ask me what my nationality is, I tell them I'm Brooklynese, because I was born in Brooklyn. Most of the guys I grew up with, I tell everybody they wound up either dead or in jail. There was a lot of that wannabe wise guy mentality. So I was fortunate enough to go the other way.
Excuse me, I need to see Detective Terra.
A source comes to us and says he was speaking to a young female.
Listen, you're not going to believe this.
That stated to him she's looking for someone to kill a one-year-old child. All we do is we debrief him, find out when, where this conversation took place, get as much of a pedigree on the female so we're enabled to identify her as possible. So what we had him do is telephone the woman, set up a meeting for an exact time and place, which was, I believe, a shopping center. He's wearing a recording device and an aid transmitter. We're in close proximity, not to be seen, but that we can keep an eye on him, make sure he's safe, and that we can monitor the aid unit. So at this prearranged meeting, she reiterates to him that she wants to have this one-year-old child killed. She doesn't explain to him why, but that she's willing to pay a considerable amount of money, that she wants it done as soon as possible. After we corroborate, let's download the tape from the informant, and we realize that this woman is serious. We have the informant now place a second recorded tape. Ask him about leaving the wife, and so he'll leave the wife, and they'll live happily ever after. From looking at this woman's background, the only thing we were really able to discover is that she appeared to live with her mother. She was had never been in any trouble with the law. She was a college student. We have still another conversation with this female, with the undercover police officer posing as a hitman, and we're trying to get a photograph or an address where this infant lives.
It's 339 for Crest Lake.
And she goes on to state, we ask her about her boyfriend, and she goes on to state that he's a police officer. So now everybody is in shock about this aspect of it. This is a new twist. So now what we're trying to find out is if the police officer has any idea that his alleged girlfriend wants his child killed. What we do, we have the undercover officer, the supposed hitman, ask her, in fact, does your boyfriend know that you're planning to kill his child? And she tells us yes. Not a shock. Now, if we just collar this woman, we'll never know if the boyfriend is involved in this or is not involved in this. So we have to play it out, take it a step further. Now we have to do the best we can, because otherwise this guy's going to have a cloud over his head for the rest of his life. Because everybody's going to be just scratching their head saying, did he know? Did he have anything to do with this? And plan was devised, we had our undercover hitman tell her that he has to hear directly from her boyfriend, this police officer, that he's all right with the killing of his child.
Well, of course he is. I wouldn't be doing it otherwise.
I need to speak to him about it. Find out.
Fine, we'll call him. We can talk.
At the same time, Internal Affairs is watching the boyfriend. The fella happened to be on patrol at the time. And the undercover speaks to someone who says he's the boyfriend.
Yeah, DJ. Yeah, that's me. So you sure you want to go ahead with this? Yeah. You're sure now? Okay? So once I hang up, that's it. We're going to do it.
We have that recorded. But at the same time, our undercover is on the phone with this supposed boyfriend. Internal Affairs had stopped the father of the child and was engaging in him in conversation. So we proved that he wasn't involved in this terrible plan to kill this child.
Great, baby. Oh, thanks.
We found out later on that she had paid some unwitting $20 to answer the phone and script a conversation with someone who was going to call him, which was our undercover police officer. So we approached her and arrested her.
No, it's mine!
She literally just broke down and cried.
I didn't do anything! You're
After the arrest of the female, she was for the most part just distraught and almost in a comatose state. She really didn't have anything to say. She just wept quietly in a cell.
Officer, how you doing? You know that affair you were having? She had hired a hitman to kill you the little lady. She was so jealous of not being it's a full investigation. We know you're not involved.
Her boyfriend was sort of in a state of disbelief that he couldn't believe his actions would have caused this woman to go this far and plot the death of his child. So after this whole incident, I felt a lot better because I feel like the child was spared. We got all the answers that we were looking for. The officer wasn't involved in this plot to kill his own child. Hopefully he learned a lesson from this and never do anything like this again. And the female went to jail where she belonged.
The thing I learned as far as being a detective, the fact that the detectives in New York City can solve crimes with 19 to 20 million people is amazing, because it's like picking one straw out of a huge haystack. And there's very talented detectives that do their job every day, and a lot of it is significant crimes that just don't, not in the news all the time, but are worthy to both themselves for their own pride and for the victims and the people that are shocked by all the aftermath that occurs. I was working in the detective squad. It was a day during the summer, nothing more than out of the ordinary. We received a phone call from patrol of a notification of a burglary. There was an emergency service truck there, patrol was there. We had learned that there was a woman home during the burglary, and that she was in her room sleeping. And as the burglary was taking place by this perpetrator, he encountered her in her bedroom.